Okay, BeLivers, so diving into this video, what I would like for you to pay more attention to rather than the place itself is the fundamentals as to why this place causes you to be in a very suggestible state. Because remember, it's not the place itself, it's the hypnotic modalities that cause you to shut down your critical mind and make you highly suggestible. So although you do want to be very cautious and alert in these places, remember, it's not the place itself, it's the fundamentals as to why. Diving into number one is like doctor's offices, dentists, therapists, anywhere where you have to like sit and wait and get help. And the reason being is for one-upsmanship. Whenever we are seeking help, especially like the more severe it is, the more help we are reaching for, we of course look up to authority to get that type of help, whether that seem they're credible because of all the school they've done or research they've done, or credible because of all the proof that they've actually done. Like you've seen them achieve, you've seen the people that they've helped, and they're just a great mentor, right? And so we want to realize that although these people may know a lot more than we do, they may not always have the best suggestions for us. And if we just take in what they're saying and then operate from that standpoint, that can sometimes be very harming if we're not listening to what our subconscious mind is telling us. And so the reason why being in a doctor's office or dentist creates that one-upsmanship is because obviously we're seeking help from someone who seems credible, but then also the fact that you have to like sit and wait and then go to a special room, and then after you sat and wait and go to that special room, you got to see someone before you even see the doctor, and then they bring them information, and then the nurse himself are in a different outfit than you are that seems like a uniform, and then the doctor that comes in is even in a stronger uniform. So it creates like all these tiers of one-upsmanship, and then by the time the doctor comes in, you're basically like under hypnosis and you're just open and receptive to everything they say. And like I said, even though doctors, therapists, they may know more than you still want to be very cautious of what's going on and pay attention to your emotional intelligence and what your physiology is saying, because your subconscious mind knows what's always best for you, and it speaks through your emotions and your physiology. So when you go see a dentist, when you go see a doctor or whatever, and you're seeking that help, listen to what they're saying, but make the judgments for yourself. I highly suggest that you do whatever it takes to be very alert, and then you also are paying attention to your emotions and your physiology as you're listening to what they're saying. I made a video called How We Become Hypnotized and How to Snap Out of It that will link above and below, so that after you watch this video, you can kind of use that video to snap out of hypnosis if you realize that you're in hypnosis whenever you're in those places. So that is number one. Then going into number two is churches and religions. Now there's actually a shit ton of hypnotic modalities that go on within religion and churches, but I think one of the main two fundamentals within this is law of repetition and then the emotional overload, right? Because in order to just get into hypnotic state, all you have to do is create an overload, whether that be emotionally, mentally, or physically. And so they use law of repetition in a sense where they're constantly repeating that if you do this, then this is what happened, or this is what happens whenever this happens, right? And so the more something becomes familiar, the more you repeat it, the more likely your subconscious mind is willing to take in that information, because the more familiar something is, the more pleasurable it is. And as you know by now, that whenever we are operating from life, just literally like all the time, we're always trying to avoid pain and gain pleasure. So the more repetition we hear something, the more pleasurable it becomes, and the more likely we're able to take in that suggestion. Another thing is it creates an overload of emotion stimuli, because they tell you that if you do this, then something very bad is going to happen. And they don't just say it once, but they repeat it and they repeat it and they paint the picture, right? And they might say it in plenty of different terms, but either way, they're using the law of repetition and they're creating that overload of emotions, right? And so you want to be very cautious of this. One thing I'm always going to repeat throughout this is pay attention to your use your emotional intelligence and pay attention to your physiology. Because even though you are listening and paying attention to all of this, your body and your emotions are still going to be an indicator to you whether this is really truthful, like this is the right path for me, this is the right information I should be taking in, or or something about this doesn't seem right? And so pay attention to that, because although religion and churches, they do mean good, there's also a lot of limitations with them. There's also a lot of error, and I think we can all agree to that. So definitely pay attention and be cautious whenever you are listening to anything religious, whenever you're in a church setting, anything like that. Again, nothing against religion. I'm very spiritual. Obviously, you know, that's what this channel is about. But you are more than likely under hypnosis whenever you're in those types of settings. So be very mindful of that and use your emotional intelligence. Pay attention to your physiology. Next place on the list is actually very similar to churches in a sense where they use a lot of the same hypnotic modalities to get you to act in a certain way, and that's conferences or business meetings or anything like that. Reason being is, number one, of course, one-upsmanship. The second someone walks up on stage or even is a speaker, even if it's just around a round table, they create that one-upsmanship, right? And usually the speaker or someone on stage is wearing a nicer outfit than you, or you had to dress nice to even be in that facility. You had to sit and wait. There's all different types of things that happen within the conferences, business meetings, things like that. They also play with the emotional side of things, right? Where it's like, if you don't do this, then this is going to happen. And it's usually something around financial worries, or if you're doing a conference about like emotional or mental or whatever, they just play with the fears of, without you realizing that they're playing with the fears of. Again, nothing against conferences, business meetings, or anything like that. Like, I'm a huge advocate about going to those things, but you also want to be very mindful, like, hey, like, I'm probably under hypnosis when I'm here. And so although the speaker is credible for being on stage and all this good stuff, I really want to pay attention to my emotions and my physiology and let my subconscious be an indicator to me, like, should I really listen to this person? Is this really the best route for me? Because even though something might have worked absolutely amazing for some person, it may not work the best for you, and it may not even be the right time for you. So conferences, business meetings, they're an amazing place to be, but they're also a scary place to be if you're just going in blindsided, not aware that you're more than likely under hypnosis, and you're just taking in exactly like what they say. Monkey see, monkey do, right? We don't realize this is what's going on because, again, you don't really feel like you're under hypnosis whenever you are in hypnosis, and usually you feel like you're judging someone and like using your critical mind whenever they're on stage. But more than likely, especially if they've been talking for more than like 30 minutes, you begin to slip off into that hypnotic state. So do your best to stay aware of that. Maybe set an alarm on your phone. Practice just consciousness rather than just floating throughout the day. All different types of things you can do, but that is number 3 or 4, is that businesses and conferences are definitely a place that you are more than likely under hypnosis. Going into number 4, and that is festivals, mainly because like there's not really usually a lot of like one-upsmanship there or anything like that, but I mean there could be if you're like really like crazy about whoever's performing and you just like want to be like them and like you're influenced by them. So there is that one-upsmanship if you're like a huge fan, but then also it's mainly because of the overstimulation, right? So from a physiological term, like there's lots of lights, there's lots of music, usually people don't eat right when they're there, and so it creates all this overstimulation physiologically, and it just really shuts down your critical mind. And that's why you see a lot of like conspiracy videos about people being controlled by subliminal images, and that's because it's very easy to control a crowd when they're under hypnosis, right? Especially when they think that they're there just to have fun and let loose, like their guard is completely down. And so obviously you want to be very mindful of that, because there are things like subliminals being flashed out into the audience, and also they might say something in their lyrics that isn't the best serving wise for your life. And if you're just like jamming out and you're like listening to these lyrics and you're just taking in that suggestion, it's becoming a part of your identity, and they could be saying some really shitty things about how to live life. Like, we can all admit that, like, although music may sound amazing, the lyrics usually aren't very serving if you were to actually live by those lyrics. And so be very mindful of that. I'm not saying don't let loose, don't have fun when you're at a festival, but be very mindful of that. Realize that, hey, I'm more than likely under a hypnotic state when I'm at a festival. It's very huge, mainly because of the overstimulation of the lights, music, etc., all these things going on. And it's usually like not a familiar environment because there's new faces, new music, new decorations, all different stuff going there, even if you've been to that ground before. So that is number 4, festivals or any type of like music club place. Last but not least, number 5, it actually probably may shock you, but that is after sex. So wherever in the world that is, that could be outside, that could be in your house, that could be on top of a washing machine. I mean, wherever the last place you had sex at, wherever that location is at. And it's mainly because of the experience that was caused. Whenever we, especially if you orgasmed, like if you did it and you're pissed off, this maybe not really be like the best thing as suggestible, but especially like if you had like a good time and you had sex with someone that you love and trust and really respect their opinion, you are highly suggestible to that person specifically, mainly because you're naked still, so it creates like a openness, and then also like you just gave your body away to that person and they were just, it has a lot to do with it, but basically fundamentally like it's because there's that one-upsmanship because you're naked and that you just gave your body to that person, and that also your brain frequency, like that's why I brought up like if you had a good time, because if you're angry and you're operating from more of like, why didn't this happen, or why did I do this, you start to operate from beta frequency brainwaves. But if you're like, that was amazing, blah, 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 you're more than likely like operating in theta frequency, and that is the frequency you are in whenever you're in hypnosis. And so after sex, wherever in the world that is, you are more than likely under hypnosis whenever that happens. And so, like I said, this doesn't really count if you had like shit sex and you're like kind of starting to operate from higher frequencies. And you're like trying to figure out why things worked in a certain way. But also realize that, because if you're having sex with someone that you love and respect, but they don't really reciprocate that to you, anything that they say to you within usually like that last like 30 minutes to hour after, you can be really harmed by it because you're taking in those suggestions and they're becoming very literal to you. So if they say like, or if they just give you a feeling of maybe that wasn't that great, or they maybe make you feel insecure about your body, or they say something totally unrelated about the sex, but maybe just about you, like about your business, or just the way you show up in life, or whatever, like that is going to be more impactful to you in that moment than if they were to say that later on during the day, because of what just happened, because of the frequencies that you're in and the one-upsmanship that just happened. So let me know like any questions that you have in the comments over this. Remember, be very mindful whenever you're in these locations, because you don't want to be a zombie. You only want to really be under hypnosis whenever you are with a hypnotherapist and you're practicing like actual hypnotherapy in a structured way, and also like right before you go to sleep, because you can't ignore that. But you really want to be cautious, of course, of all the other places that you're under hypnosis. Don't even realize it because it doesn't feel like it, and because in those places they're usually more than likely trying to change your behavior, trying to change the way you view life. And so be a conscious creator, take control of your mind, be mindful of where these places are and the fundamentals, because if these same fundamentals are happening, it doesn't have to be those locations. It can happen in your living room, right? If these fundamentals are taking place. So that's it for today, guys. I also made a video on ways that we become hypnotized, which I will link right here. And as always, my friends, dream big, live large, and be live. Bye.